filters through the narrow opening of Rue de Birague, and you pause at the threshold where centuries of footsteps have worn the cobblestones smooth. The street narrows here, creating a funnel of anticipation before it opens into something magnificent. Your fingers trail along the weathered stone wall as you walk, feeling the slight coolness that never quite leaves these ancient surfaces, even on the warmest Paris afternoons. The sound of your footsteps changes as you move from the irregular medieval stones of the Marais streets onto the more uniform paving that announces your approach to something special. Behind you, the gentle hum of Rue Saint-Antoine fades into a whisper. Ahead, through the archway, you catch your first glimpse of red brick and the geometric precision that awaits. You smell it before you see it fully. That particular Parisian mixture of old stone, the faint metallic scent of iron balconies, and something green and growing that speaks of hidden gardens. The air carries the distant murmur of conversation, the soft scrape of café chairs being adjusted, the barely audible rustle of newspaper pages turning in the breeze. As you step through the archway, the world suddenly expands. The cramped medieval streets give way to perfect symmetry, and you find yourself standing under the vaulted ceiling of the arcade that runs along the southern edge of Place des Vosges. Above your head, the stone ribs of the vault create a rhythm of light and shadow, each arch framing the next in an endless procession that curves away to your left and right. The arcade floor beneath your feet is worn smooth by 4 centuries of use. The stones are uneven enough to remind you of their age, but not so rough as to impede your passage. Your footsteps echo softly in the covered gallery, mixing with the footsteps of others, a couple walking slowly, examining the shop windows, a woman in heels clicking purposefully towards some appointment, children's lighter steps pattering as they run ahead of patient parents. To your right, the shops and galleries begin their parade. Through the first window, you see the warm glow of carefully arranged lighting illuminating canvases and sculptures. The glass reflects both the artwork within and your own figure as you pass, creating a double image that seems to blend the observer with the observed. The gallery's door stands slightly ajar, and you catch the scent of that particular mixture of old wood, fresh paint, and the indefinable smell of spaces dedicated to art. You pause at the window of Gallery Modus, where a contemporary painting draws your eye. The gallery's interior stretches back into shadows, punctuated by pools of light that illuminate each piece with museum-like precision. Through the glass, you can see a woman in a dark coat speaking quietly with the gallery owner, their conversation too muted to understand, but intimate in the way that art discussions always seem to be. The temperature under the arcade is several degrees cooler than the open square beyond. The stone walls and vaulted ceiling create their own microclimate, a buffer between the intensity of direct sunlight and the shelter of complete shade. You can feel this coolness on your arms, a gentle relief that makes you want to linger, to explore each archway at a leisurely pace. Moving deeper into the arcade, you pass a small antique shop, where the window display seems frozen in time. Silver picture frames catch and scatter the filtered light, while porcelain figurines stand in eternal conversation with crystal vases and leather-bound books whose titles have faded to illegibility. The shop's interior disappears into mysterious depths, suggesting rooms upon rooms of accumulated treasures waiting to be discovered. Your hand brushes against one of the stone pillars pillars that support the arcade. The pillar is square and solid, its edges softened by centuries of similar touches. The stone is a pale gray, almost white in the afternoon light, providing a subtle contrast to the red brick of the walls above. Each pillar stands like a sentinel, marking your progress as you move through this covered gallery that has sheltered shoppers and strollers since the early 1600s. The sound environment shifts constantly as you walk. When you pass near a café, you hear the gentle clink of cups against saucers, the soft murmur of conversation in French, the rustle of newspapers. Near the galleries, the sounds are more muted, the soft whisper of climate control systems, the barely audible hum of specialized lighting, the occasional creak of a floorboard as someone moves through the exhibition space. A gentle breeze moves through the arcade, carrying with it the scent of coffee from a nearby cafe, the green smell of the garden in the center of the square, and something that might be lavender from a soap shop tucked into one of the smaller spaces. The breeze is never strong under these protective arches, but it's constant enough to keep the air fresh and to carry these subtle fragrances from one end of the arcade to the other. You notice how the light changes as you move through the arcade. Where the arches open toward the central garden, bright daylight streams in, creating dramatic contrasts between light and shadow. But in the deeper recesses, between the shops and galleries, the light becomes softer, more golden, filtered through centuries of accumulated patina on the stone and glass. The architecture reveals itself slowly as you walk. Each arch is identical to the next, yet each frames a slightly different view of the square beyond. The repetition creates a rhythm, like a visual music that accompanies your steps. The proportions are human-scaled, grand enough to inspire, intimate enough to comfort. This is architecture designed for walking, for lingering, for the gentle pace of contemplation, rather than the hurried rush of commerce. As you near the eastern corner of the arcade, you catch your first full view of the square's center. Through the archway, framed like a painting, you see the formal garden with its geometric patterns of gravel paths and carefully trimmed hedges. The fountain at the center catches the light, and beyond it, the matching arcade on the opposite side of the square creates a perfect mirror image of where you now stand. The transition from the enclosed feeling of the arcade to the openness of the square proper draws you forward, but there's no rush. This is a place designed for savoring, for allowing each moment to unfold at its own pace. The very stones beneath your feet seem to encourage a slower rhythm, a more thoughtful way of moving through the world. You step from the cool shadows of the arcade into the warm embrace of afternoon sunlight, and the full majesty of Place des Vosges spreads before you. The transition is gentle but complete, from the intimate scale of the covered gallery to the grand geometry of France's oldest planned square. Your eyes need a moment to adjust to the brightness, and in that moment of adaptation, you become aware of the profound silence that settles over this enclosed world. The gravel path crunches softly beneath your feet as you enter the central garden. Each step releases a small sound that seems both crisp and muffled, absorbed quickly by the surrounding green space. The gravel is pale gray, almost white in the direct sunlight, and perfectly maintained. Not a weed in sight, not a piece of litter disturbing the geometric precision of the paths. Before you, the bronze statue of Louis XIII rises from its stone pedestal, the king mounted on his horse in eternal authority. The bronze has weathered to a deep green patina, darker in the recesses where shadows gather, lighter on the surfaces that catch the afternoon sun. The horse's mane seems to ripple in the breeze that exists only in the sculptor's imagination, frozen in mid-stride for more than 2 centuries. You walk slowly around the statue, and with each step, the perspective changes subtly. From the south, the king appears to be surveying his domain, looking out over the perfect symmetry he commissioned. From the east, he seems to be welcoming visitors into his royal square. The pedestal itself is inscribed with text that has been worn smooth by weather and time, the letters still legible, but softened at the edges. The formal garden spreads out in 4 quadrants around the central statue, each section a mirror of the others. Box hedges, trimmed to knife-edge precision, create intricate patterns that seem to shift and change as you move through them. The hedges are that particular green that speaks of careful tending, deep and rich, with new growth showing as lighter tips against the darker established foliage. Between the hedges, gravel paths create a network of walkways that invite exploration while maintaining perfect order. You follow one path toward the eastern edge of the garden, your footsteps joining the subtle symphony of sounds that fills this space. The distant murmur of conversation from the café terraces under the arcades, the gentle splash of water from the fountain, the rustle of leaves in the carefully placed trees. A bench appears along the path, one of several that dot the garden's perimeter. The bench is painted the traditional Parisian green, its iron frame elegant but sturdy, designed to withstand decades of use while maintaining its graceful lines. You settle onto the bench, feeling the slight give of the wooden slats, still warm from the afternoon sun. From this vantage point, the full architectural symphony of Place des Vosges reveals itself. 36 pavilions rise around you, each identical in height and design, creating an unbroken rhythm of red brick and white stone that encircle the garden like a protective embrace. The red brick glows warm in the afternoon light, each brick slightly different in color and texture, creating a surface that seems to breathe with subtle variations. The white stone details, the coins at the corners, the window surrounds, the decorative elements that punctuate the brick facades, provide a crisp counterpoint to the warm earthiness of the brick. These limestone elements have weathered to a pale cream color, soft and luminous against the deeper tones of the brick. Time has been kind to this stone, softening its edges without erasing its precision. Above the main floors, the steep slate roofs create a dramatic skyline against the Paris sky. The slate is blue-gray, almost black in the shadows, but catching highlights of silver and blue where the sun strikes it directly. Dormer windows punctuate these roofs at regular intervals, their small panes reflecting the sky like dozens of tiny mirrors. You notice how the light plays across the square as the afternoon progresses. The sun, now past its zenith, creates long shadows that stretch across the gravel paths and begin to creep up the eastern facades. The shadows are sharp-edged and dramatic, creating a constantly changing pattern of light and dark that transforms the space, moment by moment. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves of the linden trees that stand sentinel at the corners of the garden. These trees are old, not as old as the square itself, but old enough to have achieved that perfect balance between size and setting that marks a mature urban landscape. Their leaves rustle with a sound like distant applause, a soft accompaniment to the afternoon's quiet drama. The fountain at the garden's heart draws your attention with its gentle splash. It's not a grand fountain. This square was designed for elegance rather than ostentation, but its modest scale makes it all the more appealing. The water catches the light as it falls, creating tiny rainbows in the spray. The sound is soothing, a constant gentle note that seems to calm the urban energy that surrounds this oasis. Children's voices drift across the garden from the small playground tucked into the northeastern corner. Their laughter is bright and clear, adding a note of spontaneous joy to the formal perfection of the space. You watch as a small girl in a red coat chases pigeons along one of the gravel paths, her footsteps quick and light, her delight infectious. The air here smells different from the streets outside. Cleaner, greener, with hints of the flowers that bloom in carefully tended beds along the garden's edges. There's also something indefinably French about the scent. Perhaps it's the particular mixture of plane tree leaves and old stone, or the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the café terraces, or simply the accumulated fragrance of centuries of careful cultivation. As you sit on the bench, you become aware of the rhythm of the square, the gentle ebb and flow of visitors, the regular patterns of light and shadow, the constant but subtle sounds that create an urban lullaby. This is a space designed for contemplation, for the gentle pleasure of watching the world go by at a pace that allows for actually seeing what passes before you. A couple walks slowly along the path in front of your bench, their conversation too quiet to overhear, but intimate in its tone. They pause near the fountain, the woman pointing out some detail of the architecture to her companion. Their appreciation is visible in their posture, the way they move slowly and look carefully, savoring what they see. The afternoon light continues its slow transformation of the space. What was bright and sharp an hour ago is now beginning to soften, the harsh contrasts mellowing into something warmer and more golden. The red brick seems to glow from within, and the white stone details take on a honey-colored warmth that speaks of the approaching evening. You rise from the bench and begin to walk toward the northern edge of the square, drawn by the promise of the Queen's Pavilion and the galleries that line this side of the arcades. Your footsteps on the gravel create a gentle rhythm as you cross the garden, and gradually the sounds of the arcade begin to reach you. The soft murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses, the whisper of pages turning. As you approach the northern arcade, the Pavilion de la Reine rises before you, taller than the surrounding buildings, its triple arches creating a grand gateway that speaks of royal ambition. The pavilion's extra height gives it a commanding presence, and you can see how it would have impressed visitors in the 17th century, announcing through its architecture that this was a space worthy of queens and kings. You pass through one of the side arches and enter the northern arcade, and immediately the atmosphere shifts. This arcade has a different character from the southern one. Perhaps it's the way the afternoon light enters from the opposite angle, or the particular mix of shops and galleries, or simply the knowledge that you're walking where Anne of Austria once walked during her brief residence here. The vaulted ceiling above you is identical to the southern arcade, but somehow it feels different. The stone ribs create the same rhythm of light and shadow, but the shadows fall differently at this hour, creating pools of deeper darkness darkness alternating with bright patches where the afternoon sun penetrates between the arches. Your footsteps echo with the same soft resonance, but they seem to carry further in this space, perhaps because there are fewer people here in the afternoon lull. To your left, the shop windows begin their own narrative. Here you find gallery art symbol, its window display carefully arranged to draw the eye inward. Through the glass, you can see paintings that seem to glow under the gallery's specialized lighting. The space beyond the window disappears into intriguing depths, suggesting room after room of artistic treasures waiting to be discovered. You pause at the gallery's entrance, where the door stands slightly ajar. The scent that drifts out is immediately recognizable to anyone who loves art spaces. That mixture of fresh paint, old wood, and something indefinable that might be creativity itself. Through the opening, you can hear the soft hum of climate control systems working to preserve the artworks, and the barely audible whisper of someone moving carefully through the exhibition space. The gallery's interior beckons, but you continue your exploration of the arcade, knowing that each window, each doorway, offers its own discoveries. Next door, an antique dealer has arranged a window display that seems to capture centuries of Parisian life in miniature. Silver serving pieces catch and reflect the afternoon light, while porcelain figurines frozen in eternal conversation seem to watch the passers-by with painted eyes. The shop's interior stretches back into mysterious shadows, punctuated by the warm glow of table lamps illuminating particular treasures. You can see the gleam of crystal, the rich patina of old wood, the soft luster of aged leather. Everything is arranged with the care of someone who understands that each object has its own story, its own claim to attention. Your hand trails along the stone balustrade that separates the arcade from the central garden. The stone is smooth and cool, worn by countless hands over the centuries. The balustrade is low enough to lean on comfortably, and from this position, you have a perfect view across the garden to the southern arcade, where you began your exploration. The perspective from here reveals new details of the square's architecture. You can see how the roof lines create a perfect geometric frame around the sky, how the dormers punctuate the slate surfaces with mathematical precision, how the chimneys rise like exclamation points against the clouds. This is architecture as music made visible, each element contributing to a harmony that has pleased the eye for more than 4 centuries. A café terrace extends into the arcade space, its small round tables and wicker chairs creating an intimate dining area protected from both sun and rain by the vaulted ceiling above. The terrace is busy but not crowded. Parisians and visitors alike have discovered this perfect spot for an afternoon coffee or a glass of wine. The conversation is animated but respectful of the space's dignity, creating a gentle buzz that adds life without destroying tranquility. You catch fragments of conversation as you pass: French, English, something that might be Italian or Spanish. The languages blend into a pleasant murmur that speaks of Place des Vosges' international appeal. This is a space that transcends nationality, speaking a universal language of beauty and proportion that needs no translation. The afternoon light slants through the arches at an increasingly acute angle, creating dramatic contrasts between the bright garden and the shadowed arcade. Where the light penetrates and illuminates the red brick walls with an almost theatrical intensity, making each brick seem to glow with its own inner fire. In the shadows between the arches, the stone surfaces take on a cool, mysterious quality that invites closer examination. You notice how the shopkeepers and gallery owners have adapted to the rhythm of the arcade. Doors stand open when the weather permits, creating a seamless flow between interior and exterior spaces. Window displays are changed regularly, but always with respect for the architectural setting. Nothing too flashy or commercial that might disturb the square's essential dignity. A bookshop appears ahead, its window filled with carefully selected volumes that seem to reflect the intellectual history of the Marais. Through the glass, you can see shelves stretching back into the shop's depths, and the warm glow of reading lamps illuminating comfortable chairs where browsers are encouraged to linger. The shop's door is propped open, and the scent of paper and binding leather drifts into the arcade. The sound of your footsteps changes as you move from the stone floor of the arcade to the wooden threshold of the bookshop. Inside, the atmosphere is hushed and reverent, the way bookshops should be. The proprietor, a woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes, nods a greeting, but doesn't intrude on your browsing. This is a place for discovery, for the serendipitous encounter with the perfect book at the perfect moment. Back in the arcade, you continue your slow progress toward the eastern corner. The light continues to change, growing warmer and more golden as the afternoon advances. The shadows lengthen, creating new patterns on the stone floor, new relationships between light and architecture. This is a space that rewards patience, that reveals different aspects of its beauty as the hours pass. A small crowd has gathered near one of the galleries, where an opening reception seems to be beginning. Well-dressed Parisians hold glasses of wine and speak in the animated tones that art always seems to inspire. Their enthusiasm is infectious, adding a note of cultural vitality to the afternoon's gentle rhythm. Through the gallery's windows, you can see paintings hung with museum-quality precision, each one illuminated to show its colors to best advantage. As you round the eastern corner of the arcade, the character of Place des Vosges shifts once again. Here, where the northern and eastern arcades meet, the afternoon light falls differently, creating new patterns of shadow and illumination that transform familiar architectural elements into something fresh and surprising. The corner itself is marked by one of the square stone pillars that support the vaulted ceiling, and you pause here to let your hand rest on its surface, feeling the coolness that never quite leaves these ancient stones. From this vantage point, you can see the full length of both the northern and eastern arcades stretching away in perfect geometric precision. The repetition of arches creates a rhythm that seems to pulse with the heartbeat of the square itself. Each arch frames its own small tableau, a gallery window, a café table, a passerby caught in a moment of contemplation, while contributing to the larger symphony of the architectural whole. The eastern arcade has its own personality, distinct from its northern and southern counterparts. Perhaps it's the way the late afternoon light enters at this angle, or the particular mix of shops and residences, or simply the knowledge that you're approaching one of the square's most famous addresses. The atmosphere here feels more residential, more intimate, as if the commercial energy of the galleries and cafes has given way to something more domestic and personal. Your footsteps echo differently here, perhaps because there are fewer people in this part of the arcade at this hour. The sound seems to carry further, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling and the stone walls to create a gentle percussion that accompanies your progress. properties of these arcades are remarkable. They can carry a whispered conversation from one end to the other, yet they also seem to absorb and soften harsh sounds, creating an environment that encourages quiet contemplation. Ahead, a brass plaque mounted on one of the pillars catches your eye. As you approach, you can read the inscription that marks this as number 6, Place des Vosges, the former home of Victor Hugo. The plaque is worn smooth by weather and time, but the letters remain clearly legible, a testament to the enduring fame of France's greatest novelist. The simple brass rectangle seems almost modest for such a literary giant, but perhaps that modesty is appropriate for a man who wrote so eloquently about the common people of Paris. The entrance to the Maison de Victor Hugo stands open, welcoming visitors into the apartment where the author lived from 1832 to 1848. Through the doorway, you can see the beginning of a staircase that leads up to the museum, its wooden steps worn smooth by countless pilgrims come to pay homage to the creator of Jean Valjean and Quasimodo. The entrance hall is cool and shadowy, a transition space between the public life of the arcade and the private world of the writer's domestic life. You climb the stairs slowly, your hand trailing along the wooden banister that Hugo himself must have touched thousands of times. The wood is dark with age and smooth with use, and there's something moving about this direct physical connection to one of literature's immortal figures. Each step creaks softly under your weight, a sound that would have been familiar to Hugo as he climbed these same stairs after long days of writing or political activity. The museum opens into rooms that have been carefully restored to reflect the period of Hugo's residence here. The apartment is not large. Even famous writers had to live within their means in 19th century Paris, but it's filled with the kind of details that bring the past to life. Period furniture, carefully chosen to reflect Hugo's taste and social position, creates intimate spaces where you can imagine the great man at work. In what was once Hugo's study, a writing desk stands positioned to catch the light from the tall windows that overlook the square. The desk is not Hugo's original, that has been lost to time, but it's from the same period and arranged with the kind of objects a writer would have needed. Inkwells, quill pens, blotting paper, and stacks of manuscript pages. The chair behind the desk is drawn up as if Hugo had just stepped away for a moment and might return at any time. From the study windows, you have a perfect view of Place des Vosges spread out below. This is the view that Hugo would have seen every day during his 16 years of residence here, and you can understand how it might have influenced his writing. The geometric perfection of the square, the daily drama of Parisian life playing out in the arcades and garden, the changing light that transforms the space from hour to hour. All of this would have been part of Hugo's daily experience. The other rooms of the apartment reveal different aspects of Hugo's life and work. His bedroom, with its heavy curtains and period furnishings, speaks to the domestic side of the great writer. The drawing room, where he would have entertained the literary and political figures of his day, is arranged to suggest the animated conversations that must have taken place here. Throughout the apartment, Hugo's drawings and manuscripts are displayed, revealing the visual artist that existed alongside the writer. You linger in the apartment, reluctant to leave this intimate connection with literary history. The afternoon light slanting through the windows creates the same patterns it would have created in Hugo's day, and for a moment the centuries seem to collapse. You can almost hear the scratch of his pen on paper, the rustle of manuscript pages, the murmur of voices discussing the great political and social questions of the day. Eventually, you make your way back down the worn wooden stairs and into the arcade. The transition from the museum's carefully preserved past to the living present of the square is gentle but complete. The arcade receives you back into its embrace, and you continue your exploration with a new appreciation for the layers of history that surround you here. The late afternoon light has continued its transformation of the space. What was bright and sharp earlier is now golden and warm, creating a completely different mood in the arcade. The red brick walls seem to glow from within, and the white stone details have taken on a honey-colored warmth that speaks of the approaching evening. The shadows are longer now, creating dramatic contrasts that turn the simple geometry of the architecture into something almost theatrical. A few doors down from Hugo's former home, a small gallery displays contemporary works that seem to dialogue with the historical setting. The juxtaposition is striking. Modern paintings and sculptures in a space that has remained essentially unchanged since the 17th century. Yet somehow the contrast works, as if the eternal questions that art addresses transcend the boundaries of time and style. You pause at the gallery's window, studying a painting that seems to capture something essential about the play of light and shadow in the arcade. The artist has understood how the architecture creates its own weather, its own microclimate of illumination and shadow that changes constantly but follows predictable patterns. The painting freezes one moment of this eternal dance, making it available for contemplation and appreciation. The late afternoon has settled into that magical hour when Paris reveals its most seductive face, and you find yourself drawn to one of the café terraces that extends into the arcade space. The terrace belongs to a restaurant that has clearly understood its privileged location. The tables are set with crisp white linens. The chairs are comfortable but elegant, and everything is arranged to take advantage of the views across the square, while remaining protected by the vaulted ceiling above. You settle into a chair that faces both the central garden and the arcade, positioning yourself to observe the gentle theater of Place des Vosges as the day winds toward evening. The chair is wicker, painted in the traditional Parisian green, and it creaks slightly as you settle into it, a comfortable, lived-in sound that speaks of countless other visitors who have sat here to watch the world go by. The waiter approaches with the unhurried efficiency that marks the best Parisian service. He's middle-aged, with the kind of professional dignity that comes from years of understanding exactly what his role should be in this setting. His recommendation is simple but perfect: a glass of Sancerre, and perhaps some cheese to accompany the afternoon's contemplations. The wine arrives quickly, the glass properly chilled, the pale gold liquid catching and reflecting the warm light that filters through the arcade. Your first sip of the wine is crisp and clean, with that mineral quality that speaks of Loire Valley vineyards and careful winemaking. The acidity cuts through the richness of the afternoon air, creating a perfect counterpoint to the visual feast that surrounds you. The cheese that accompanies it is a selection of 3, a soft camembert, a aged comté, and something blue that the waiter identifies as Roquefort, each one representing a different region of France, a different tradition of craftsmanship. From your table, you have a perfect view of the square's daily rhythm as it shifts toward evening. The harsh contrasts of midday have given way to something softer and more forgiving. The light now comes at an angle that illuminates the western facades while leaving the eastern arcades in cool shadow, creating a dramatic chiaroscuro effect that transforms the familiar architecture into something almost cinematic. The central garden has taken on a golden glow, the gravel paths seeming to emit their own light, while the carefully trimmed hedges create patterns of deep green shadow. The fountain continues its gentle splash, but now the water catches the slanted light in new ways, creating moments of brilliant reflection that sparkle like scattered diamonds. The statue of Louis XIII, backlit by the western sun, seems more majestic than ever, the bronze taking on warm highlights that bring the metal to life. People continue to move through the square, but their pace has slowed to match the mellowing day. Couples walk arm in arm along the gravel paths, their conversations quiet and intimate. Children play near the fountain, their bright clothing creating moving points of color against the formal geometry of the garden. An elderly man sits alone on one of the benches, feeding pigeons from a paper bag, his movements patient and ritualistic. The other café terraces under the arcades have filled with the evening crowd, Parisians finishing their workday with a glass of wine, tourists savoring their discovery of this perfect square, couples sharing quiet conversations over coffee or aperitifs. The sound of conversation creates a gentle buzz that seems to emerge from the stone itself, as if the arcades were designed to be resonating chambers for human interaction. Your waiter returns to refill your wine glass, and you notice how the light has continued to change even in the few minutes since you sat down. The western facades are now bathed in warm gold, while the eastern arcades have deepened into cool blue shadow. This is the daily drama of Place des Vosges, the slow transformation of light and shadow that makes each hour different from the last, each visit a unique experience. A gallery across the square has turned on its interior lights, and through the windows you can see paintings illuminated against white walls. The gallery's interior seems to glow like a jewel box, drawing the eye and creating a focal point in the architectural composition. Other shops and galleries follow suit as the natural light begins to fade, creating a constellation of warm lights that seem to echo the original intent of these arcades as covered spaces for commerce and social interaction. The Sancerre has warmed slightly in your glass, and its flavor has opened up, revealing layers of complexity that weren't apparent in the first sip. The cheese has reached perfect temperature, the camembert soft and creamy, the comté nutty and complex, the roquefort sharp and pungent. Each bite is a small meditation on the French genius for transforming simple ingredients into something transcendent. A street musician has set up near the fountain, and the sound of his violin drifts across the square. He's chosen his repertoire carefully. Nothing too intrusive or commercial, but gentle melodies that seem to complement rather than compete with the architecture. The music adds another layer to the sensory experience of the square, weaving itself into the existing symphony of fountain splash, conversation, and footsteps on gravel. The light continues its slow transformation, and you realize that you're witnessing one of the daily miracles of urban life. The way a great public space can serve as a stage for the gentle drama of human existence. Every person who passes through your field of vision is is playing their part in this ongoing performance, whether they realize it or not. The businessman hurrying through on his way home, the couple sharing a quiet moment on a bench, the children playing near the fountain, all are part of the larger composition that makes Place des Vosges more than just a collection of buildings. As the natural light continues to fade, the artificial lighting of the square begins to take over. Subtle fixtures hidden in the arcades cast pools of warm light on the stone floors, while the garden is illuminated by lamps that seem to emerge from the landscaping itself. The effect is magical, but not theatrical. The lighting designers have understood that their job is to extend the day, rather than create something entirely new. Your wine glass is nearly empty, and the cheese has been reduced to a few perfect crumbs. The waiter appears as if summoned by telepathy, offering coffee or perhaps a digestive to complete the afternoon's indulgence. You choose coffee, a small espresso that arrives in a proper porcelain cup, accompanied by a small square of dark chocolate that melts on your tongue with bitter sweetness. The coffee is perfect, strong enough to cut through the wine's gentle haze, smooth enough to complement rather than overwhelm the lingering flavors of the cheese. The chocolate adds a final note of luxury, a small indulgence that seems entirely appropriate to the setting. This is how afternoons should end, with simple pleasures perfectly executed, surrounded by beauty that has endured for centuries. The square has settled into its evening rhythm now. The harsh light of midday is just a memory, replaced by the golden glow that photographers call the magic hour. Every surface seems to emit its own light. The red brick walls warm and inviting, the white stone details glowing like ivory, the slate roofs reflecting the deepening sky. This is Place des Vosges at its most seductive, when the architecture seems less like stone and mortar, and more like a living thing breathing in harmony with the city around it. You finish your coffee slowly, reluctant to break the spell of this perfect afternoon. The square continues its gentle performance around you, but you feel yourself becoming more observer than participant, more audience than actor. The wine and the warmth and the beauty have combined to create a state of perfect contentment, a moment of urban peace that will linger in memory long after you leave this magical place.